Okay, this is my 6th video log for adolescent learning and development. Just going to be talking about something that is concerning me that I've noticed over the past couple weeks, and basically it's just about all the fights I've been hearing about at the middle school. And you know, the first time I heard that there was a fight at the middle school, I wasn't really, like, surprised or anything, because I think that happens everywhere at a lot of schools, even really good schools, especially bigger schools, like public schools. So I wasn't, like, you know, I wasn't too shocked about that. But after I heard how many fights have been going on at that school, you know, I think that something needs to be done, and it's a reflection on the educational system there, because, you know, for a school like Fisher, located in Ewing, which I know Ewing isn't, like, the best area, but it's not, you know, Trenton, and, you know, they shouldn't be having these kinds of issues, I don't think. And I was hearing about fights from, like, other tutors who were telling me, like, yeah, my kid said this and my kid said that, and, like, you know, my kid, like, got in a fight, or, like, my kid wasn't here today because he was in a fight yesterday. And like what are all these, you know, what is up with all these fights? And even both of the girls that I tutor in Mrs. Gallagher's room have had fight stories. And I found it, like, really interesting that so many fights break out amongst the girls. Actually, I was really surprised. I mean, I know that there are some girls, tough girls, who aren't afraid to get in a fight, but the amount of that I've heard, it's just crazy. So a couple weeks ago, the one girl I tutor, Maddie, she plays field hockey, and she told me that one day when they were at field hockey practice, the girls' soccer team was, like, on the next field over, getting ready for a game against, I want to say Hamilton. I could be wrong, but for the purpose of this, I'll just say it was Hamilton. And apparently, like, this is according to her, some girls from Hamilton made some comment about how the Ewing girls were, like, so ghetto, and then a couple of the Ewing girls on the soccer team, like, came at them saying, like, oh, you want ghetto? Like, we'll show you ghetto. And they, like, got in this whole fight, and, like, it was, like, this huge, like, brawl, apparently, and the cops were called. And I'm like 12 and 13-year-old girls, like, on a soccer team, getting in, like, a huge fight where the cops have to be called. First of all, I don't understand why the cops were called in the first place. I feel like there should have been enough coaches and parents, like, enough adults there, and, like, referees to, you know, break this up or prevent it from happening in the first place. I don't really understand why this had to even happen, but then why the cops were called at a middle school girls' soccer game, like, that's unheard of. And I just think that, you know, I think that's a little over the top for a school like that. So that was shocking. Also, the other girl that I tutor, Faith, she told me that she had had an in-school suspension before because I was filling out the progress reports for them, and she like looked over and saw that, and she was like, "Oh, are those ISS papers?" And I was like, "What are ISS papers?" She said in-school suspension. I was like, "How do you know what ISS papers look like? You know, have you had an in-school suspension?" And she said, "Yeah, I have. I've had one." And I was like, "Really? What'd you do?" She said, "I beat up a girl." I was like, "Oh, really?" You know? And I didn't want to, like, judge her. I didn't want to be like, "Oh, you shouldn't have done that." Like, I didn't want to be, you know, that person who I'm sure enough people have, like, or hopefully, you know, enough people have, scolded her or whatever you want to call it. And, you know, so I didn't want to be that person, especially months after it happened, because she said this happened when she was in 7th grade. And I asked her about it, and she was like, "Yeah, I sent the girl to the hospital." And, like, at first she's telling me this story, and she seems totally, like, you know, like, "Oh, yeah, like, I beat up this girl, I sent her to the hospital." And I was just like, "Oh," like, "really?" And I was like, "Why'd you beat her up?" She's like, "Well, she beat up my friend, so I beat her up." I was like, is this what they, like, is this what they teach these kids? You know, like, why is that the way to solve problems? Like, this girl beat up my friend, so I'll go beat her up, send her to the hospital. You know, apparently the girl was out of school for days, maybe even weeks. And, you know, Faith is telling me this, but the one good thing about it, if you want to even call it a good thing, she said to me, which showed me a little bit of her maturity and how she's grown since the situation happened. She did say, she was like, "Yeah, well, the girl has forgiven me and her parents have forgiven me," she said, "but I don't really know if I've forgiven myself." And when she said that, I was like, you know, like, it's things like that that surprise me about the middle school kids, and it surprised me in a good way, because they, you know, a lot of them, they're not bad kids, they just are a little misled, and they're in those, like, storm and stress years, I think that's what it's called, and they're just emotionally, like, you know, going crazy, and that doesn't warrant that for them to get in a fight. That doesn't, like, make it right or rationalize it for them. You know, it's still wrong. She still shouldn't have done it. She should have been able to control herself, but, you know, it shows that she's not, you know, she's not a bad person. And I mean, I knew that already before she told me about this incident, and after she told me, I still didn't think she was a bad person. You know, kids get in fights sometimes, but overall she's just another kid at Fisher Middle School getting in a fight. I don't want to know how many of them have been in fights or witnessed one, or, you know, it's scary. But so that's just something that's been concerning me, and I feel like the school should be doing something about it and taking more action, and, you know, to prevent this, and maybe, like, have some sort of, you know, they have, like posters and signs that say, like, anti-violence, and, like, you know, violence is not tolerated at our school, but it is. Like, you know, kids get away with it, and I know it's a public school, but I feel like the amount of fights are way too high, and something should be done about it.